Okay, hello everybody. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. Thank you to everyone for coming to this session on project management for research software and being a bird. I am Sarah Jaffa. I am a senior software engineer at the University of Manchester, and really been sort of thinking about project management for a year and a half now, with support from the SSI Fellowship. So thank you to them for giving me some time to look into this. There we go. What we're going to go through today, we've got an hour, something. So I'm going to do a quick bit about sort of why we're here, why we care about this, or at least why I care about this, why I think it's important, and why I hope you think it's important. I was going to do a bit of an intro to Agile, but we've had a few talks about the sort of what Agile is over the last couple of days. So if you are not familiar with Agile, please go and watch the recording of Anne and Adrian's talk, or look up some of the many resources online. But from the feedback from those sessions, it sounds like a lot of people are already either using Agile or have looked into it. So I'm just going to focus on when we think Agile is useful, why you might choose to use it or not. And then we've got a few talks from Mike, Anne, and Monica, and Jonathan, who are online, about some different ways of doing project management in different settings. We're going to do the questions for those three presentations all together at the end. So throughout the three presentations, please put your questions on the Canopy system, but we'll answer them after all three presentations are finished so that we can sort of compare the different views on things. Then we're going to have a little small group discussion, so we'll split up into groups of 4 to 6 people and have a chat about how you do project management, what you find are the good things, the bad things, how you feel about it, and really what support or help you would like. Because part of my reason for running this is, you might have heard a lot about the special interest groups. I'm trying to start a special interest group about project management. Over the last couple of years at RSECon and Collaborations Workshop and other RSE spaces, lots of people care about this, lots of people feel like we want training or want something. And so I'd like to start a special interest group about this, but I'd like your input on what that special interest group should do, how it should work, what things it can offer, and hopefully if you could give some time to it, whether that's being part of a committee or just turning up to meetings or writing a blog post or something small. So, to get started, why do we, or specifically me, care about project management? I really started thinking about this when I was still a sort of blank RSE, standard level RSE, because I thought I wanted to go for a promotion. I wanted to go into project management and get to that level. And I sort of looked around at the other people doing the project management and went, great, how did you learn how to do this? Where can I do a training course? Where can I get experience? Where can I figure out if I would be good at this? And most people said, you just do it and figure it out. And that made me uncomfortable. I think this is something that might come up in EDI talks, that women often wait until they are fully qualified for a job before applying for it, whereas men will go for a job if they're about 60% qualified. So I hope that by supporting more people to actually get training in things, we will help women feel comfortable applying for more jobs, and possibly help the men who are only 60% qualified do their jobs a bit better when they've already got them. But I realized this was a bigger problem, really, when I looked at the RSE International survey from 2022. There was this question asking, what 3 skills would you like to acquire to improve your work as an RSE? And there were a lot of technical tools in there, GPUs, testing, new languages. But I was surprised that one of the biggest in blue there is project management. And actually, I think if you combine it with the green one underneath, which is project management in French, it would have been the biggest skill on there. It might have beaten GPUs. So clearly, there are a lot of us who want this training, that either we are managing projects or we want to manage projects, and we feel like we need some help to develop those skills. I think good projects and well-run projects, let's face it, everything we do is part of a project, whether you want it to be or not. Everything is part of some kind of project or program or service. It affects everything. You might have heard the phrase that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. So if you're doing this and doing it badly, or if someone in your company is doing it badly, you are contributing to mental health problems and stress and bad health at work and people leaving jobs. So managing your people and your projects well can really increase job satisfaction, increase retention. So from each of our individual points of view, we would like to be part of well-run projects because it makes you more satisfied, it makes you more productive, it makes you get on better with your colleagues. And from an institutional point of view, it increases staff retention and productivity. Through talking about this at several different places, I asked a question at a previous conference. The lower half of this image is a Mentimeter quiz I did, asking how many people in that room had any formal project management training. And you can see the biggest group on the bottom right is people who said no training at all. A couple of people said yes. Some of them, I think 2 people said they actually had training in how to manage projects as an RSE. Most people who had any training, it was in a different context, so project management for researchers or for people in industry. So training that actually applies to RSEs was really lacking. And that is why really I want to start the special interest group, hopefully to try and find this training or build this training or offer this training, but also just for peer support, that project management is a stressful and scary thing we all have to do. It can be difficult. There can be loads of different issues to do with tools or institutions or individual people, and having some peer support forum where you can talk about those issues and get other people's views and experiences, I think would be really valuable. So, I'm not, as I said, I skipped the slide on the what and why of Agile, because I'm hoping you all already know that, or go and watch the recording of Anne's talk. But I'm going to talk about when. When should you use Agile? I'm not saying that all project management is Agile. I think it should only be applied when it's useful. But when might you choose to do that, given that most of us are being told to do that? And I think that comes back to the Agile Manifesto. So on the right top bit there, you've got the Agile Manifesto, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan, and finally, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So Agile is good when those things are what you're aiming for. So working software over comprehensive documentation, that is, you're in a world where you don't need your requirements and your design up front. This then doesn't apply to things like some medical things, some civil engineering-y kind of projects, anything where you need to pre-register your very detailed plans so they can be safety or legal checks. If you need to do that, you have to do all your planning up front, so Agile isn't going to really serve you there. Collaborating with customers over contract negotiation means you have some available collaborators. We have probably all worked on projects where the academics are less available than we would like. If you can't get that regular feedback, is the cycle of Agile really going to work? Or one of you has to pretend to be the customer and make up what the feedback is? So if you can actually break your work down and get feedback on it, Agile is great. If that is impossible because of the way your project is working, maybe you need to skip some of those things. Responding to change over following a plan, the Agile was designed because the world was moving faster, because the market of any piece of software was moving. And so you had to change more rapidly than in the past. That is very relevant to a lot of research projects. We get researchers who basically don't know what they want until they see it, and then go, no, not that. But if you do have someone who has all their requirements up front, they say, I want to build a website, it needs to look like this, it needs to be blue, that bit should be pink, and it should have these 3 buttons, and I'm completely certain, and we've already checked. Then you don't really need Agile. You can just build that website and give it to them. Fine, done. The final one I think is really rarely discussed. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. People over processes. This is always at the start of any Agile book you will read. They talk about the manifesto, peoples over processes, and then they go on to spend 100 pages telling you about the process. I went on, we were lucky at Manchester to go on the official Scrum Alliance Certified Scrum Master training. And they talk very much about Agile works when you have small teams of engaged people who have all the skills to do the thing. They want to do the work. They trust each other. They trust their Scrum Master. They have a good open relationship with the researchers. If you don't have that, none of the rest of it works. And I have not so far seen 0 training on how to get that. If you have a team who don't trust each other or don't trust their managers or aren't engaged or don't have the right skills, how does Agile function? Does it function? Should we give up and do something else? Should we actually train people first? So yeah, these are some reasons you may or may not want to use Agile, or just adapt Agile to work in a different way for our world, because some of these things do and don't apply to different research projects. I have recruited a series of lovely people to help me talk about this. And again, I really want the focus to be on the people part of this as well as the processes. So we're going to start with a talk from Mike Simpson, some work that came out of a recent collaborations workshop about task management for self-care, thinking about we're not just trying to make our employees more productive. We're not trying to work people to the bone. How many systems can we put in place to get 12 hours a day out of them? We're thinking about how can our people work better, be happier, and thrive in their jobs. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Sweet. Hold my slides. Yes. Right. OK, so yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened at the SSI Collaborations Workshop earlier this year. And as we've said, we're talking about this idea of people, not processes. It's not just what tools are out there and how can we use them, but why are we using them and for whose benefit? Because I think that's an important conversation. I think that's something we want to sort of bear in mind as we're going into this workshop. So that doesn't quite fit on the page, but you can see most of it. So I'm used to standing up on this stage, metaphorically speaking at least. I've been up on this stage a few times talking about my work, and I usually talk about my PhD, the fact that I'm an RSC, my work in data visualization. Oh, echoing. Stopped echoing, good. And the fact that I'm a trustee of the Society, as you may have noticed. You've had to listen to me a lot over the last few days. That's the sort of stuff that I'm used to standing up on stage and talking about, but there's a whole sort of other story that doesn't really get told, and that is that I am someone who has struggled a lot with my mental health over the years. So since 2011, my life got turned upside down. I won't give you the full stop story, but it wasn't a good year for me. And it took me a long time to recover from that. I had to go through CBT therapy. And I finally managed to sort of turn my life around, and I was in a place where I was fairly happy and doing quite well. And then my son, who I love to bits, I want to make that clear, was born on the 19th of April 2020, less than a week into the first national lockdown. So I was stuck, locked in a home with a baby who had come out with a broken collarbone. My wife, who had developed mastitis and anemia, I was trying to look after them. I was trying to do my day job. I got recruited to do some teaching, which I should never have been asked to do in the first place. It was a really difficult time, and I ended up burning out and having an anxiety attack and having to take time off work. And as part of that whole process, I've learned that writing about my mental health helps me to process it and evaluate it. And more recently, I have been writing blog posts that I've shared with family, friends, colleagues to try and encourage the people to do that, to keep the conversation going. I think that is really important. I promise this is relevant to task management. I am getting there. There is a story. We're moving on. Part of the backstory, as some of you will know if you were here in this room 2 years ago, Dave Horsfall, who has been our wonderful program chair, was an SSI fellow, conducted a survey into mental health in our community. Dave has obviously been a little busy, so we haven't had time to publish the results yet, but I've been helping him analyze those results, and we are hoping to publish those in the next few months. There's some very interesting stuff in there. And I'm actually planning to apply for a fellowship myself to continue Dave's work around mental health. I'm getting to the point, this is all relevant. Which brings us to the 2024 SSI Collaborations Workshop. This is only the second CW that I've attended, and it's a brilliant event that I hope to attend a lot more in the future. But I was going into that with this idea of, we want to continue the conversation around mental health in our community and to find ways to practically support it, but what can we do to do that? I was trying to think of some sort of magic bullet solution that would make everybody in the RSC community happy. I don't think we can realistically do that, but we were split into groups, and I was talking to people about this. I explained this. I think there's a few people from that group I can see around in the room. And I mentioned this interest in how we can support mental health, and we had a very interesting conversation where there were a number of colleagues who said that they had used productivity frameworks, task management tools, whatever you want to call them, as a way to sort of help look after themselves and to balance their workload. So we've got this problem, which is that, RSCs are, and I'm not wearing my unicorn t-shirt. I wore my unicorn t-shirt yesterday. That was terrible planning. RSCs are expected to be unicorns. We have to work really hard. We have to context switch. We have to jump into these world-leading researchers in fields that we've never worked with. It's hard work. They don't pay us enough. And I think there are times, at least, when a lot of us do struggle to manage that workload, particularly with all of that context switching and doing training, trying to do career development stuff on top of that. It can be a real challenge. And I think the conversation at CW came around to this idea that these productivity tools could help us. And I have to say that initially I had a sort of fairly visceral negative reaction to that idea, because I think I have the same image that I suspect some of the people in this room have of productivity tools being something that your manager walks in and uses to try and get you to do more work for them without giving you any more money. And so I sort of had a very negative reaction to that when it was originally suggested, but colleagues went on to explain how they had used it to manage their workload and to be able to go home at the end of the day without that little voice in the back of your head going, oh, you haven't done enough, or you forgot to email such and such, or you didn't do this, blah, blah, blah. And I think, yeah, people have shown that these tools can be used as a way to manage your own time, to look after yourself, and as a form of self-care. So, I mean, there are things that we can't change, there are things we can't fix. We can't persuade your boss to give you more money or less work, although society sort of working on those sorts of things, but that's a hard battle that's going to take a long time. And so what can we practically do to help support that? And so we came up with this idea. The font has changed and that doesn't fit on the screen, that's really annoying, of task management for self-care. And the idea was that it was going to be a sort of carpentry-style course that could either be done as a workshop, so you could teach your entire team this, or it could be a resource that people work through themselves in their own time. And it would introduce you to a range of these different productivity frameworks, task management tools, whatever you want to call them. But we really wanted to make sure that the focus was on you using these tools for yourself, for your own benefit, not your managers. That ability to go home at the end of the day, feeling like you've been productive and silencing all those nasty little voices in the back of your mind. And particularly just because of who was sat around the table, we had this sort of focus on people with neurodiversity and anxiety, but I think this sort of tool could be useful to certainly a large percentage of the RSE community. So on the day we were able to get a GitHub repository set up, start getting some basic content into it. My focus was on sort of writing the introduction and getting that sort of aim, that goal really, really clear. But we started talking about some of the challenges of being an RSE, which I've already mentioned, and some people who've had experience with these tools started putting that information in and collecting it together. It is actually already available on the Car Prodigies Incubator, and I can send you a link to that. It's still very much a work in progress. None of us have really had much time to make as much progress on it as we'd have liked. But it is available, and as I say, at least me, possibly some other people in that group are planning to use it as part of their application to the SSI to continue work in this area through the fellowship. And we are keen to engage with the community to get ideas on how we can expand this, spin off from this, what other things we can do. I think little things like this that support subsets of the community can make a really big difference. And yeah, I think it is really important. One of the things that shows how important it is was that we won, I can't remember what the prize was, but we did win one of the top 3 prizes on day 2 for generating the idea. And then we went on to win the top prize on day 3 at the Hack Day for that idea. And I think it shows that people understand how important mental health is and are keen to get involved with anything that can help them support their mental health at work and improve things. Just briefly, I want to say a huge thank you to, there's a long list of names, I'm not going to read them all out, but the amazing people who helped us get this project going. And if you're interested, I think that QR code works, we'll take you to the incubator site, or I'll share the link in the Slack afterwards so that you can all go and check it out. And yeah, I think as we carry on with this session, I think we just want to think about, why are we using these tools and who are we using them for, as well as just, what they are and how we can use them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next talk will be from Anne Gledson on how, moving on to now doing the rest of the thing, talking about processes, as I just said, how Scrum is used at the University of Manchester.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to do a subset of the slides I did the other day, but I'll try to talk around them a little bit more. But for the benefit of those that weren't at the talk, I'll go through them again. Okay, so I've just done enough of the Scrum background just so that you can understand the remainder of the slides. So Scrum is an iterative project management process. So instead of speaking to the stakeholders, coming up with the requirements at the beginning, then going off for months, possibly years, and then coming back later and finding out that the requirements are out of date, it's constant iterations that usually last about 2 to 4 weeks, and you keep going back to the stakeholders and demonstrating the product, and then coming up with another sprint where you're taking more tasks out of the product backlog to be the next things to be worked on in the next sprint. Okay, so a project is carried out over many sprints executed back to back. Okay, so we have this thing called a product backlog, which is owned by the product owner, who is usually it's the person who is between the stakeholders and the development team and the Scrum Master. So they're in charge of the product backlog. It's all of the tasks that maybe need to be done to have a completed product. It's prioritized. It's full of work items, things like new features, enhancements, bug fixes, and they can be written as user stories. A good issue has a clear definition of done, and the product backlog, as I said, is a living thing, so items can be added, removed, reordered, and evolved. So it's not just something that's static, that remains the same for the entire project. And then the sprint backlog is kind of like a subset of the product backlog. It's owned by the development team, it's managed by the development team, and it's what's to be worked on in the next sprint. So nobody else can add items to the sprint, which is important for what I'll talk about later, and that includes the product owner. The product backlog work items can be broken down into smaller items and then put into the sprint backlog. And each work item has a size estimate. So it's broken down into reasonable sized chunks of work to be getting on with. And each one has a size estimate, which is the relative amount of effort to achieve the definition of done. Okay, so why? So first of all, talk about why adopt Scrum, and then we'll talk about why we adapt it and how we adapt it. Okay, so in research projects, there's a constant evolution of requirements and priorities, which characterizes research. As I said earlier, it's lots of smaller iterations, so that produces a fail fast and regular feedback mechanism, which minimizes risk. It's small teams, and the teams are often cross-functional, research software engineers are cross-functional by design. They train up on a lot of skills, working on a lot of different projects, so they're kind of fairly cross-functional as part of their career. And the focus is on a subset of tasks which makes complex solutions tractable. So the big ideas that the PIs have in their head about what they want at the end, we can break it down into smaller parts, and that is actually part of the Scrum process. Okay, so also there's clear roles and expectations. There's a history, progress, and plans always visible to all of those, so it's very transparent. Transparency is a word that I use a lot, so everybody can see what everybody's doing and why and how long that should take, and with all of the communication along the way, which I'll elaborate more in a minute. And also it eliminates the bus factor. So instead of having to write, lots of documentation or handover documentation, it's all in the cards within, well, in our case, it's within GitHub projects, but it can be Jira or whichever tool you decide to use. So that's an example. On the right-hand side, we've got an example of a task card in GitHub where one of our RSEs is explaining what she's done with feedback from some of the academic team and also her fellow developers. Okay, so why should we adapt? So on the left-hand side, we've got a typical Scrum team. So all of our lead RSEs were sent on a Scrum Master course as part of our training. So basically, proper Scrum teams, if you're going to take Scrum from its original form, it's developers who were working on one project at a time. So the idea that we've got developers working on more, it doesn't really fit with Scrum. So RSEs usually work on multiple projects concurrently. It's usually, in our department, it's usually 2. So proper Scrum teams in the Scrum methodology consistently are 2 to 8 developers, plus a product owner and a Scrum Master. In our RSE and academic teams, it's unpredictable. It's an unpredictable team. It usually includes 1 to 2 RSEs, maybe a PDRA, and maybe 1 or more academics, depending on how engaged they are and how willing they are to attend all the meetings. In proper Scrum teams, they have a dedicated product owner, whereas academics are split between projects and often not available or engaged to do this role. There's a dedicated Scrum Master, so we have senior RSEs who usually assume this role, but they're split between projects, so they have to be Scrum Master on several projects. And a product is almost always a thing in proper Scrum when you see it described. For example, a software solution or an application, whereas in our case, the product might sometimes be lab support or training and not necessarily a concrete asset. Okay, so what we did keep in. So for the product owner, it's usually the PI if we can get them, or somebody nominated by them. The nominee is often a PDRA, but on some of our projects, it's the RSE who acts as a product owner. It's a really small project, and they don't actually have much engagement with any of the research team. It's always a senior RSE that we have as a Scrum Master. So when we have our sprint planning meetings, it's a senior RSE who kind of puts the board up and sort of moves things around on the board and gets agreement from the development team, who's often 1 RSE or possibly 2 RSEs. So it's RSEs and sometimes PDRAs and PhDs as the development team. So in our Scrum team, we often have people that aren't in the RSE department who are actually doing the coding. There's a product. We do have the product backlog. We do have a sprint backlog. It's all held within GitHub projects. We have a Kanban board, which GitHub projects allows you to make fairly easily. We have sprint planning sessions every sprint. Our sprints. It's usually worked out by how. So if I've got an RSE who's working 0.4. FTE on a project, it's usually once every 4 weeks. If it's 2 RSEs, it's once every 2 weeks. But we just work that out for each project. So we have Kanban sprint. Yeah, so we do have stand-up meetings, but they're not daily. So they're more like 2 weekly check-ins on average. But you know, we always say that because it's often a one-to-one. It's just the RSE lead and the RSE. So it's just, you know, whenever they want to have, if they need to have a chat, they can do. But we do have regular ones at least fortnightly. We have a sprint review that's tied into the sprint. So you do the sprint review first, so the review what work's been done, and then we start doing the sprint planning for the next sprint. And we have a sprint retrospective kind of, so it's via one-to-ones between the RSEs and the senior RSE. So I guess that's sort of tied in with the non-daily stand-up, so that, you know, that we can keep talking to them about how the sprint's going and how they're finding it, and if there's anything we can change. So the core elements are all there, but how we implement them is very flexible, and it varies, as I said, from project to project. For tools, we use GitHub projects, so I won't go into that now. I'm not sure how relevant it is for this talk. So if you want to find out, you know, how good GitHub Projects is, it's a bit in its infancy as far as GitHub Projects is concerned, but it's got some good functionality, and they're trying new things out. And it's fairly easy to use. I think that's it. That's my last slide.
Thank you very much. I've seen we've got a couple of questions on Canopy. Please don't forget to ask questions for all our presenters, and we'll answer them at the end. So our next talk is going to be online. So would Monica like to share the screen? I will stop sharing.
I think I need you to stop sharing first. Yeah.
Okay. So our next talk is from Jonathan and Monica, who are at UCL, about how projects are managed there. Does that look okay? Yeah. Okay, take it away.
Excellent, thank you. So we're in UCL's Advanced Research Computing Centre. We've been using various agile approaches to run our projects. I'll give a bit of background. I'm the head of what's now called the collaborations team. And then Monica will talk about some more details of specific approaches that we're taking. She was employed, not that recently anymore, but rather more recently than me, specifically to oversee this area as an agile delivery manager and provide training in agile approaches. So I'm going to skip fairly quickly over the first two slides because we've talked about this already, both today and yesterday, that in some ways, Agile really fits research context well, but there are also challenges and ways in which possibly it needs to be adapted to suit each individual situation and approach. So you can get issues of research where what you call the value or even the product that you're producing is a bit uncertain. The collaborators are not always fully available. Generally speaking, they don't know a lot about Agile, or if they've heard of it, they think that's an industry thing. How is that relevant? So these can all be worked around, but they do need to be taken into account in how we run projects, how we run agile methods within a research context. And then there are some challenges that are more specific to RSE groups like ours, like Manchester's, that have a pool of staff working on many different projects. Our project teams are typically small, contributing to also small, but not quite as small, perhaps research groups working on the project. Therefore, we're often switching because people are deployed on multiple projects at the same time. There's often not enough budget for full-time people, so not for multiple full-time people on one project. And you've got all of the extra stuff that's involved in being an RSE group, being in academia on top of that. And you do get turnover of staff. This happens within any organization. One advantage that we have in groups is that we can really get some best practices, processes for doing handovers and knowledge sharing. So I think we do better than research generally in this area, but it's still a challenge. And there's often new things coming in that mean we need to shift staffing around. And so that's something that people need to be aware of and manage well. So the collaborations team within ARC is roughly half the department that gets directly involved in supporting research projects in UCL and further afield. Used to be called the RSE group, but we've expanded beyond just research software engineers. We now have 5 different professions and around 60 staff. And so I'm no longer head of RSE. I now oversee all of this activity. We have another head of RSE within the group. And we have many, many projects that we're working on at any given time. So stats as of the end of last month, 81 projects in active delivery with 60 people working on them. As you can see, there's a many-to-many mapping between those. And then a large pipeline of future work coming in that will hopefully keep all of these people employed and indeed keep the team steadily growing over time. Another important part of the context in which we operate is that we're within a department and within a division within a university that also have their ways of operating that we need individual projects and their management to try and sit within. And we're privileged in some ways in that a large part of the wider organization is already sold on the value of Agile. And so the Information Services Division within UCL and ARC as a department overall are also trying to be Agile in the ways in which they approach work. And in particular, using a variation on the scaled Agile framework from bringing together lots of teams individually doing Agile into an overall organization that's following Agile approaches. And there are various kind of large scale Agile type things. But in UCL, ARC is treated as a department as one portfolio within the organization. And there are various events, ceremonies in the jargon, for synchronizing between different streams of work, and what we call term and increment planning. So universities operate on terms. The main way in which that affects us is that we have this 3-monthly cycle of events where we can synchronize with the rest of the department and the wider university and decide which people are going to be working on what projects over the next 3-month period. So it's the resource allocation problem that's happening now on a regular cadence rather than on a ad hoc whenever a new project starts. Oh gosh, who on earth do we find to work on this type approach? Individual projects need to fit in with that to some degree because their staffing is decided at these 3-month cadences. But the individual project management and planning can happen at whatever frequency makes sense for them, and indeed using whatever agile method makes sense for them. So we don't have to have a one-size-fits-all for each project. And because the research projects are to some degree independent, they can kind of operate on their own. But we try to come back together on this 3-monthly basis to look at what interactions could we be having between projects? What could we be developing that's shared solutions that can actually inform university services and improve how we work overall as a department as well? So we are trying to learn from each other, not just be completely independent. I'll now pass over to Monica to talk about one of the ways in which we manage projects.
Thank you, Jonathan. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about some details of our journey of implementing agile ways of working in collaborations projects in UCL ARC. So when implementing agile ways of working for research projects that we just agreed, all of us, that they tend to be small and requiring various ways of flexibility. Scrum or Kanban are the usual methodologies we look at. While Scrum is offering more structure because it has the predefined roles and predefined ceremonies, it is also more demanding to implement. We have currently a handful of projects that are running on various ilks of Scrum, quite similarly as Anne just described. Kanban is much more popular because it is much more flexible to implement. One of the advantages of Kanban is that we literally can start where the team is at. So we can respect the existing roles, existing ways of working, and then any implementation of the changes that we identify as appropriate for that particular project can be implemented incrementally with the collaboration of the entire team. The empowerment of each team member to actually participate in leadership of the team is one of the advantages of Agile in general, and it is a very important principle that needs to be followed when we are implementing Kanban, especially because there is no predefined way of how to do this. The entire implementation of Kanban centers around understanding, visualizing, and managing the flow of work. So this is done technically, usually through tools of project boards that we recommend to create in GitHub. And also around understanding how we can implement the feedback loop that is both informing future output of that particular project or team, and also improving the process that the team is working in. And so that is pretty much what the practices are focusing on, those two things. So when we are talking about implementing Agile for specific projects, the usual question comes is how do we recognize what is more suitable? Is it Scrum or Kanban? Obviously, there is no clear-cut question, clear-cut answer for this, and there are many criteria coming into play. Some of these, or the main ones, are listed here. First of all, Scrum. Sorry. Sorry, I thought there was a question. Scrum is centered around planning and delivery in sprints, whereas Kanban uses continuous flow, where work items are picked one after another. So Kanban is especially suitable for work that is continuous, such as services or support of a particular solution. For that kind of thing, Kanban is definitely ideal. The second criterion is work in progress. So in Scrum, work in progress is very much determined by what is planned for the particular sprint, for the particular person or particular skill. In Kanban, this is much more tricky, and it is definitely an important item to watch out for. It is important to ensure that the team is encouraged to complete work that is in progress before picking new items. So if there are not too many dependencies, if there is not too much complexity, and we can generally ensure that sufficient amount of work can always be completed before new items are picked up, then Kanban might be the methodology of choice. Another difference is that there is no prescribed mechanism in Kanban how to implement feedback loop about the process, in contrast to Scrum, where we have the sprint retrospectives. So we have embedded feedback loop from the entire team there already. So that is one of the things to consider. The larger is the team, the longer is the project, the more complex, obviously, the more important the feedback loop is. So either Scrum might be more appropriate, or we have to implement the feedback loop in Kanban specifically. The next two criteria are going towards planning. So in Scrum, we are doing sprint planning, which is centered around predefined sprint goals that very much focus the team on the common goal. And then the sprint also offers regular, predictable cadence of output. In Kanban, we have no such thing. So it is important to understand this and consider what the focus around sprint goals would be something that it would be useful for the project. And is the cadence of output important, or are we just continuously flowing with the work as in service or support? And the last very important point is that is the engagement of stakeholders or customers. Again, in Scrum, we have sprint reviews where customers, stakeholders get a regular view of the interim output from the project. In Kanban, there is no such predefined thing. And unless it is very seamless and boring support of some kind of service, it is always encouraged to implement some kind of regular review, even if we opt for Kanban. So these are the main criteria. Obviously, another one is ease of implementation, which we talked about already. It is always easier to start with Kanban, but not necessarily the right answer always. So the approach to how we approach the implementation of Agile for our individual collaborations projects. We have introduced project reviews. The aim of these is to review discuss any challenges and issues that the projects might be facing in the area of the project management. So we discuss the structure of the projects, the tools they are using, the ways of working, and then we identify if there is any improvement to project. The next action, which we are just starting, is making sure that we embed Agile Delivery Manager in the start of every new starting engagement to make sure that basically the projects are set up for as much success as possible from the very start. So either it is participation of the ADM in the kickoff of the project, or separate discussion with the project manager or with the entire team to to discuss how the project will be operating. One of the actions that was actually the first one that we started over a year ago is introduction of our own Agile training specific for research projects. The content of this is centered around Agile principles and Agile values. Then there are some details on the techniques of Scrum and Kanban, and the main focus of the training is to discuss their experience of the current or previous projects, their issues and challenges they are facing, and then the team together is trying to collaboratively apply the Agile principles and or the methodologies that we just talked about before to help come up with the ideas to resolve those challenges and issues. The format of this is 1 day session, usually up to 10 participants, and we have run about 10 of these, not 10 of these, about 6 of these so far, and it is now a regular thing that is planned roughly once a month. And the last of the actions is project management support by the Agile Delivery Manager for the individual projects as they either request or what comes out from the project reviews. So that there might be providing coaching to the project team specific to their particular issues and needs, or just discussion about various issues and challenges and suggestion of resolution. Or what we do is we embed Agile Delivery Manager as a part-time Scrum Master in the Scrum projects, which we found quite successful because this frees up the RSCs then to focus on their work, or as a part-time project manager if we are using Kanban. And so that they are the main actions. Some of the lessons that we have learned so far is, the first one is every project is different, and just implementing any particular methodology out of the box, Scrum or Kanban, doesn't work. What is important is to understand what is the purpose of each of the ceremonies or roles, and basically make sure that we apply the principles and the values of Agile rather than the kind of the steps themselves. The second learning is that the teams have great potential of the process improvement themselves. Obviously, all the RSCs and researchers are very extremely smart and academically curious people naturally. So they often treat project management as a research topic as opposed to just a set of rules. So it is a very important well of knowledge and further improvement to recognize and tap in through open discussions and trainings, etc. The third one is basically being brave and trying to introduce the optimum solution that we identify, not somehow assuming that just because it requires a certain level of change, people would be opposed to it just because they are busy or somehow prone to not wanting change. It is important to understand the issues of the particular projects, the specifics, identify the most appropriate ways of managing the projects, and then try to implement it in the consensus, basically, rather than not being brave to do that. And the fourth one is just generally the power of implementing Agile. It is the methodologies, the individual steps are often extremely simple and might seem to be trivial. And so it is important actually to recognize that they are, despite of that, quite powerful. What we have found working quite well is embedding professional dedicated to facilitating the Agile process in the teams, so that the team themselves have then the space to focus on their work and on the content of the work rather than following the Agile process. Yes, thank you. And next learning that we have separate slide for is the fact that although the Agile Manifesto, the values and principles are very, very suitable for research environment, the wording itself that actually Sarah very conveniently presented before, thank you for that, is a little bit obsolete in the way that it comes from the commercial setting from 20 years ago, and it can make it slightly more complicated and obscure to see the clarity of how the principles and values apply to the research and academia setting. So what we have started to do is we have introduced open discussions of how to reword these without actually changing the core of the values and principles to suit better to the research and academia setting. So you can see on the slide the Agile values. I'm not going to read it aloud. I think you can see it there. And this is basically the agreed Agile values as we have redefined them within ARC. At UCL, we are still working through the 12 Agile principles and to discuss the appropriate wording of those. We are hoping to be done with it by the end of October, and then we will also publish it on the ARC website and in a blog.
Thank you, Monica. I think that's it for our slides.
Thank you very much. I think we have quite a lot of questions coming through on Canopy. We don't have time for lots, so I'll just do the most popular ones. If you want to continue discussing, please join the Slack channel. It's called BOF Project Management or something like that. But yeah, further discussion can happen on Slack if you want to ask more questions. But yeah, if we just have whatever's the most upvoted question. So a question to Anne. When a single RSE is working on a few different projects, are there ever issues around being in too many meetings and context switching impacting their ability to focus on development work?
Well, our RSEs usually work on 2 projects at a time, and that was before we introduced Scrum. So that's not a... I think a lot of our RSEs enjoy working on more than one project because they, there's always at least one that they'll enjoy more than the other, and it just gives them a bit of variety, and they learn more skills as they're going along. So I've never, I don't think that ever comes up as a problem, does it, for working on more than one project? In fact, if anything, if they're just working on one project, they tend to get siloed somewhere, and they don't meet as many people. So. Yeah, and I think with Agile, well, with Scrum, maybe I'm biased, but that helps because we have, one thing that's not come up yet is the fact that we have like a bandwidth of how much work you can do at the sprint planning sessions. So if they're only working 0.4 FTE on a project, then and the tasks break down, it becomes really obvious in the sprint planning session what they would be capable of achieving in each sprint, and that's obvious to them and to the product owner or PI, like the people who who own the project. So that is actually quite beneficial, and that has come up where people have said that they like that, and that it's a bit of a relief to have it out there exactly what it is likely that they can finish in a sprint.
Thank you. I'd like to just ask online the UCL team if they have a comment on that as well. Do you find that having people working on multiple projects impacts their being in too many meetings or that sort of thing?
It can do, yes. I mean, generally speaking, we try and chunk work on projects partly to get around that. So if you're working on 2 things, you're not necessarily doing 2 days on one, 2 days on the other, but you might do a couple of weeks on one project, then a couple of weeks on the next. Depends a lot on what the rest of the wider team are doing as to how well this works in different places. But yes, we're always trying to reduce context switching and meeting overload.
Thank you. And I think that feeds nicely into the second question, which we're probably going to pass to Mike. Are there any specific task management strategies that would help with your mental health, possibly related to that question of working on multiple things at once?
Yes, so this is something I'm actually exploring a bit at the moment. So I personally, I use GitHub projects. I use sort of Kanban boards using the principles that I think our online colleagues taught us at a recent training session. And yeah, so I've been, I actually did a talk, one of the previous, I'm sorry, I've had a long week, I'm tired. I've done a talk previously about how I've used GitHub projects to manage one of the larger projects that I've been working on for the last few years. I find that's sort of really helpful for sort of moving stuff around. And as it turns out, I had more or less formed the sort of same columns on the Kanban board that were officially part of that. So I can definitely recommend that. But I think on top of just keeping track of what your tasks are and whether or not you've done them, I think there's definitely some importance on reflecting on the tasks when you've completed them, because personally I find quite often I get to the end of the day and feel frustrated because I don't feel like I've been as productive as I could be. And getting control of that narrative helps to change the way that you feel about it. And I think if you reflect on your tasks and say, actually, I only got 3 tasks done today because I couldn't get that one to work because something wasn't responding or because Azure wasn't cooperating or whatever, sort of reflecting on what you've done as well as just ticking off your tasks is actually a very useful process.
Thank you very much. As I said, if there are more questions on Canopy that you really want to discuss, please join the Slack channel, and I'll ask our presenters to go and have a look and see if there's any specifically for them. But I'd like to now, if we can, so in the room, I'd like people to sort of shuffle around so you're in groups of about 4 to 6 people. And if you are joined the Zoom, can you please log out so I can see how many people are really on the Zoom? Because we'll put online people into breakout groups. And I'd like to have a quick discussion about, we've heard about a lot of the tools and the processes you can put in place, but thinking about what, if you wanted more training, more resources, what could a SIG do to help you? What training could we offer? What would you like to do if we had funding to run events? Is it learning about different kinds of Agile? Is it trying these things out? Hearing about how other people have done things, or just meeting up to have a good moan about how annoying this all is. So people in person, please shuffle yourselves around. People online, I will put you into breakout rooms. We'll give it 10 minutes, and then if we can come back together at 10 past, and just, if you could put on the Slack channel any like top things in your group, what do you think a SIG could do for you? And we'll have a review at 10 past. Thank you very much.